good to have you still in the rig as we take this trip down the road from Bismarck. And as I said earlier in the show, and if you're just joining us, one of the things I said was while I'm in Bismarck, I like getting a chance to see some people face to face that we want to be able to bring you on this show. Jeb Williams is one of those. He's the boss now. And you know, he worked at Game and Fish for a long time, and I'm not blowing smoke at him when I say this. I really appreciate the fact that Governor Burgum went in-house. He went with somebody who knows our state. As somebody who's bought a hunting license every year since I had to buy a hunting license versus just got to go with the old man, you know, it's good to see Game and Fish with the stability that it has. And so I've had him on, but now I get to tell him face to face, congratulations for the job. Are you liking it?
It's been a great fall, Joel, and I I appreciate your nice comments, and so far it's been great. I haven't had any regrets yet, put it that way.
Well, here you haven't quit yet, see, so that's a good sign. You must be liking it. So, in terms of the passion people have about North Dakota and the outdoors, it's one of the reasons so many of us stay here. You know, we'll go through cold spells, so we'll do all of those things because we just love the outdoor conditions here. Does that come through? I know that Game and Fish has pushed hard for, bringing youth in, and are we continuing that? Are you seeing the type of licenses that would show growth, or is the interest in being outdoors hunting and fishing, is it wavering?
Well, that's a great topic, and it's something, Joel, that as a department that we have put a little extra priority on over the last number of years as far as our recruitment, retention, and reactivation efforts as far as associated with hunting and angling. And sometimes in North Dakota, we're behind the times a little bit on things, and sometimes that's a good thing. And this is one of those to where it is a good thing. We've been able to see in other states some of their challenges to where, for a lack of a better term, the wolf is on their doorstep a little bit. It is having the lack of license sales, things like that, lack of interest is having an impact on their budgets, which then has an impact, of course, on the opportunities that can be provided to the public. So the department has had an opportunity to take a look at that and to try to plan a little better for the future to where we don't get into that situation. And so it gives us an opportunity to be a little more proactive and try to identify some things. And that's always a nice place to be when you don't necessarily feel it's a problem right now, but understand that it could be. And so that is a challenge, I think, that we have in North Dakota, especially as we get a little more urbanized. Mm-hmm. You and I have talked a lot, Joel, in the past about rural North Dakota and, of course, what that means, the culture associated with fish and wildlife, hunting opportunities, fishing opportunities, trapping opportunities. It's just a way of life. And so it's something that we need to make sure that we keep reminding people about that culture and what we have and how important it is to our state in general.
I think at times, when I got to Bismarck as a 32-year-old state senator, I didn't know how Game and Fish was funded. You have this assumption that, hey, you go to the legislature, you make your pitch just like anyone else, they'll give you an increase. I don't think people understand how North Dakota Game and Fish is funded. And maybe we should take a moment for you to get a chance to explain that to folks.
Yeah, and I appreciate that as well. That's something I think is always important. We remind people that we are a self-funded agency as far as people that buy hunting and fishing licenses. That's where we get our income from, in addition to where we have some federal dollars where we're able to match with our state dollars the federal excise tax. That is a small tax that's put on all hunting and fishing equipment that people buy in the stores. It goes back to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service into a federal pool that then gets distributed to the states based on their size and their number of licenses that they sell. And so those dollars then can be put to fish and wildlife use. So like you said, when the legislature gives us dollars, they're not really giving us dollars, they're giving us permission to spend our dollars in appropriation wise as far as the bank account that we have. And so it's a very passionate group of people, and of course that system was put in place by people who recognize that, hey, this is a user pay system that we feel very passionately about, that we want to contribute. We don't want to feel like this is a tax type situation, that we are very passionate about making sure that we fund the things that we so dearly enjoy.
Well, and I would add to that, that you're not hitting me with increases on my fishing and my hunting license, my
Yeah.
sportsman's license. So something's working.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at what I'm paying for my deer license every year, and it's no different. I mean, I'm not seeing I'm looking at it going, this is what I paid how many years ago? And so something is working within the system.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's important with that, I think, Joel, it's always good to talk about is I think the department's always been conservative in that aspect, as well as the legislature, as far as saying, can we get an increase in license fees, or do we need that increase in license fees? I think a lot of times people make the comparison as far as a deer license at $30 versus going out to a movie, and they maybe say to themselves, they're like, wow, a deer license is really underpriced, and or just a general sportsman's license that you can get for just over $50 that gives you so many days throughout the year as far as
Right.
activity wise, and they go, wow, that seems really cheap for what you're getting. And they're probably not wrong, but again, from a budgetary standpoint, the department has always felt like we want to be respected in the way that when we ask for an increase, it's because it's something that is needed, not
Yeah.
because we feel like we can.
Well, and I think your philosophy, now that you're the head of it, should be always to, if you do need money, to get it from the out-of-staters.
Yeah.
Just
Well, you'd have
double
some,
and triple their
yeah,
license.
you'd have some support from some people on that, Joel, for sure.
I
Yeah.
have absolutely no doubt. Except that you got this little issue about maybe I want to hunt in their state too. So then
Exactly,
the
yeah.
payback can be a son of a gun
Right.
when it comes to it. What are you hearing about ice conditions out there?
Well, I think in most areas, Joel, especially when we're talking eastern North Dakota, not that great, simply because we have a pretty good snowpack on top of that, on top of the ice, which is of course provided some insulation, which maybe hasn't equated to as good and as much ice out there as people think in comparison to the cold conditions that we've had. So I think there's some challenge out there. I think there's some access challenges out there with the amount of snow that we have in some of these areas. And so, yeah, it's definitely not as easy going as maybe last year. Last year, of course, access wasn't an issue pretty much throughout the state with lack of snowfall. Ice conditions, we probably didn't get as good ice conditions last year as until this time of the year and
Yep.
until January, just because of the mild weather that we had. But in a nutshell, people need to be careful about ice conditions out there simply because of the snowpack that is in place.
I got a buddy where we always kind of put our fish houses in. Where I come from, it's a snowmobile, not a snowcat. Everybody's got their own term. It isn't an ice shanty. It's a fish house, but we put our fish house pretty close because there needs to be a poker game here and there. But I called him and I said, "What are you hearing?" I said, "I don't see your house on the lake I live, and I don't have mine out. What the heck's going on out there? I don't see any pickups. I see a lot of pull behind, the canvas type fish houses out there." And he said, "I'm hearing only 11 inches." At Christmas time, when I went out, we had gotten that big snow, so there had to be foot and a half of snow out there. And I had taken a video in front of my house of where the smooth ice was because I always make an ice rink for the kids. And I got grandkids that like to skate. So Sue and I go out there and we're shoveling and we're shoveling and we're shoveling. And I was going to take my Ranger out and doze it. Everywhere I popped, it was around 8 inches of ice. Well, I'm not mad enough at the fish to
Right.
go out there on 8 inches of ice and find myself in the bottom of the lake getting teased by everybody for 10 years.
Yeah.
Whatever you can do to make more ice, I want you to take.
Yeah,
There.
well, I think this nice warm week that we're having right now, and it looks like that warm spell is supposed to stick around a little bit, so that's probably not going to help. But again, I think some of these areas that you probably could, if you're comfortable taking a pickup out there. Again, I think in a lot of these areas, I wouldn't be comfortable doing that. But even in areas where guys maybe would, it's going to be challenging, I think, just with the snow conditions that are out there. Now, obviously, the individuals that have some of the track machines and things like that, I mean, they're going to be buzzing around no problem out there in some of those areas. But there's no doubt that with the amount of snow that we have out there is going to make things a little more challenging as far as people getting to their particular spots.
Well, and maybe some of this snow good weather will get rid of some of that snow and we can get some ice made.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
of it. All right, we're days after what I think was a pretty good pheasant season, but definitely not all over. And so grade it in terms of what you're hearing from the men and women that count on you. I mean, how would you grade this year's pheasant season?
I think it was a B, honestly. I mean, I think that I think that the department, in some of our surveys that we had, and just based on the dry conditions, and one of the things that, we do see a lot, and when we do have real dry years as far as our survey runs go, it's probably a little underestimated in terms of, lack of dew to where those birds don't need to get out to the roads when, things are kind of wet in those mornings. And that's, of course, a really critical part of our roadside counts in the summer. And so I think what we saw with our surveys and what people saw in the field this year, I think we're a little bit different, but different in a good way. I mean, we're always glad that, when we get to a situation where we felt like we've maybe underestimated what's out there. I mean, that's an expectation thing in people's mind. That's a good thing, rather than maybe the opposite way where we're telling people, boy, it's going to be a knockout year, and then people go out there and go, whoa, what were they seeing? And so I think you're dead on when you talk about pockets. And that's something that we have definitely been seeing over the last number of years, is in certain pockets, there's really good numbers, good bird numbers. People had good year, good opportunities, but in other areas, not so much. And so I think that was, again, a consistent thing.
See, anybody who thinks that we're smarter than all the critters out there needs to hop in my pickup right after deer season and look at the deer, smirk at you from everywhere. Now the deer season's over. Same thing with pheasants. I drive 65 miles to work every day, and I drive by some shelter belt lines now. I didn't see pheasants there ever. Now I'm seeing them, and it's like they know the season's over, and they look at you like, ha, ha, ha. Good luck. Maybe you'll see me next year. I mean, it's one of the things that I love about the outdoors, though.
For sure, yeah.
When the season's over, you still get to see, all of them out.
You do, and again, just some of the changes. I mean, that's an interesting observation too, Joel. Is that so? Over the last several days, previous Sunday I was down in Hettinger, and then yesterday I was up in Devil's Lake. And a number of years ago, which you of course remember in your legislative days, is lots of discussion and lots of controversy associated with one of the things you talked about earlier, non-resident hunting, as far as pheasant hunting and that area. Well, I think in between Richardson and Hettinger on Sunday, I saw more mule deer than I saw pheasants,
Really?
Which of course is totally opposite of that 15, 20 years ago discussion.
We had a house in Mott.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously that was the hotbed, right?
Yeah,
that was where everybody went when you talked about pheasants. Well, then yesterday on the way to Devil's Lake and the way back, I saw more pheasants on that stretch than I did, going down in that stretch from Richardson to Hettinger. So it's just interesting how the times have changed, how the landscape has changed. There's no doubt about that. Pheasants are very responsive to habitat conditions and what, CRP, grassland type conditions, which of course isn't as prevalent on the landscape as it once was in that particular area. So just interesting to observe some of those changes over the years.
Well, a perfect example you guys have always talked about, and you have habitat. I mean, you never saw corn. When I was going to UND, you never saw corn north of Highway 46. And then all of a sudden, corn just kept making its way north. When I was up at UND, the only thing we hunted was doves. I mean, that's the only thing we could get out. What that made for, Jeb, is you'd get out, you'd do some dove hunting, then you'd go home and you'd do some pheasant hunting. They look like a Newman sign out there. If you missed a pheasant after getting your sight down with doves, you were really bad. So, all right. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate the invitation.